I'd love to centre in on what I understand was the critical issue for you, and I believe it is as well. I mean, it is an enormous thing to come to grips with the resurrection, and I hear people making all sorts of critiques of Christianity, arguing all sorts of issues as to why they believe or can't believe or whatever. That seem to me to be of far lesser importance. Even the ideas of people walking on water pale into insignificance beside the idea of a Christ rising from the dead. That really is extraordinary, isn't it? And everything hinges on that. If it's true, it's the most profound thing in human history. If it's not, countless millions of people who thought it was true and the central thing in history actually have been misled and have wasted their lives. It's as profound as that. Could you narrow down just a little more on your thoughts as to why it's critical and what point? Can you identify a point at what point in your life when you thought, in your intellectual and if you like, emotional journey, you thought, I actually think on balance this is right? Because it's a very big step, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is a big step. The resurrection is not just the big miracle next to all the other miracles. It's not different purely in scale compared to Jesus feeding the 5,000 or healing lepers, restoring the sight to the blind. The resurrection is categorically different. The resurrection is the way by which Christians believe Jesus has undone all of the evil that came with original sin. So, it's the core of the Christian faith in a way that sets it apart from the relationship that other religious believers might have to miracle claims that they make. And I think that's a distinction that I didn't understand until I started investigating it more recently, even though I've been a historian of Christianity for quite a long time. Uh, it's also an event that, considering it is said to have happened 2,000 years ago, we have a surprisingly large amount of surprisingly high quality textual evidence. And I think there were a few things that happened. One is that, as I revisited the Gospels in this process of seeking, and of course I'd read the Bible plenty, but as I revisited in this kind of new mindset, I began to react to the weirdness of Scripture, to the way in which it so often has the quality of not of mythology, not a fable, but of baffled human authors desperately trying to make sense of these bizarre things that happened. I was especially struck by, upon rereading, the descriptions of Jesus's healings, especially in the Gospel of Mark, and how each one is so different and so strange. Jesus, taking a man aside and kind of spitting and making mud with his fingers and pressing mud onto his eyes, or it taking a couple of tries to get the blind man at Bethsaida, who initially sees trees walking, to have his full sight and see people. They don't follow a formula. So there's this way, and C.S. Lewis says something similar in his account of his conversion. There's this way in which I just began to react to the Gospels as a historian, and developing a sense of kind of trust in them as documents. Now, I'm not someone who trusts my instincts. My gut reaction to a document is not a valuable source of empirical evidence, right? So I was persuaded by the scholarship of people like N.T. Wright, Richard Bauckham, who make the case. Craig Blomberg is another scholar in the U.S. who's done a lot of work on this, who make the case for an understanding of the gospel accounts as being quite a lot closer to the experiences of the eyewitnesses, if not necessarily written by eyewitnesses themselves, than many scholars believed, earlier in the 20th century. And I think this is a view that it has gained more and more credence among biblical scholars. The big argument that N.T. Wright makes in his giant book, The Resurrection and the Son of God, is through the accumulation of 800 pages of evidence, he sketches out for you the milieu of first century Jewish belief and practice in its broader Hellenistic context. And he makes the case that whatever Jesus's followers might have imagined or fantasized about or dreamed would happen in the context of Jesus's crucifixion, it wasn't the bodily resurrection. It wasn't this. It is a completely, it's an event, a phenomenon that violated all of the sort of cultural and ideological expectations about when resurrection would happen, who it would happen to, whether it would concern the body, what that would even mean. And this is another area in which the sheer weirdness of the gospel accounts made a huge impression on me. I mean, if you study the accounts of the resurrected Jesus in his appearances to his disciples, they are so strange. They are not descriptions of a ghostly figure. They're not descriptions of a normal human body reanimated like you or me. They are, I think N.T. Wright's term is something like transphysical, right? They are a Jesus who is sometimes recognizable, but not quite the same, who can kind of pass through doors, and yet can also stand on the beach and fry up a fish breakfast, right? So there is a sheer bizarreness to it that deeply impressed me, and made it, and this is perhaps counterintuitive, but made it more plausible to me. And I also had to confront, this is the other piece of it, how deep my own epistemological grooves were, and how I had been operating in a very sort of blinkered worldview that is really willfully ignorant of the experience of reality as reported by the majority of humans when it comes to the supernatural. Directly after my conversion, my next big kind of research project was an investigation of reports of miraculous healing claims. And so I spent time, reading scholarly, accounts of, the preponderance of some of the better testified claims of healing, interviewing scholars who have done, as close as you can get to kind of scientific empirical investigation of, the healing of blind and deaf people in, revivals in Mozambique. It's hard, you can't do, a controlled experiment, but there are people who've gotten as close as you could possibly imagine to that, interviewing them, talking to, Christians from other national contexts who have a very different relationship with the supernatural. I mean, something like, 80 or 90% of people who become Christian in places like Myanmar and China report personal experience with healing, with miraculous healing. Now, yes, you can write off some proportion of those reports as wishful thinking, hallucination, sure. However, was I really willing to dismiss the testimony of millions of people? I got to a point where I couldn't. And so once you destabilize that anti-supernaturalist bias that is really quite particular to this historical location, sort of modern Western technological society, that opened up ways of thinking about causation that I think changed how I had to view claims about the resurrection.
That is a fascinating journey that you've described, and I'm sincerely hoping that many people tap into it here, as I'm sure they have in other places. Thank you for being so honest with it.